In this episode of Idea City,
the fact is that if you want to work for Starbucks as a barista, you have to have at least 30 hours of training. But you can become a lawmaker in the Parliament of Canada or in your legislature without 1 hour of training in lawmaking or much else.
Moses Neimer's Idea City Conference. Ideas change the world.
So the last time Preston Manning was here with us, and I hope he's not bored hearing of it, I compared him to Moses. And not to me, but to the biblical Moses, because really the analogy is almost perfect. Preston, armed only with a burning idea, Western alienation, and powered by a burning passion to somehow cut down that power of big central Canadian government, started a little grassroots movement, saw it gain momentum, acceded to power in the form of being the formal opposition, and eventually that, in turn, gained government, except not with him at the helm of the two parties that he created, the Reform Party and the Alliance. That role fell to, I guess, Stephen Harper playing Joshua. And while Mr. Harper has validated Preston's work, Preston is not quite as close to power as some people might expect. Despite that, he continues to advocate, he continues to educate, and he comes here from time to time to tell us what's on his mind. It's very nice of you to come back.
Thank you very much. And I want to, at the outset, assure Moses that I am an optimist. I'm a Canadian optimist, of course, which has been defined as someone who thinks things could be worse. But I'm an optimist. I'd like to begin by citing a fact and raising a question, which will explain a little bit about why I'm here and what I've been doing since I escaped from the House of Commons. The fact is that if you want to work for Starbucks as a barista, you have to have at least 30 hours of training. But you can become a lawmaker in the Parliament of Canada or in your legislature without 1 hour of training in lawmaking or much else. The question that I'd like to ask you is, if you were sitting on your seat in an airplane that was preparing to take off, and the pilots came in, and you heard one of them say to the other, "You know, I've never been in one of these things before. Would you remain in your seat?" And yet, many of our elected officials at the municipal level, provincial level, and the federal level have never set foot in a democratic assembly until after they win an election and are all of a sudden handed some responsibility for piloting the ship of state. So I realize that, speaking to Canadian audiences, that many of us, many of you are disappointed and disillusioned, perhaps even bitterly disappointed with the performance of our political class. You go a long way to find a political conference with the erudition of the ideas that are expressed here, or the communications capacity, or the inspirational capacity. But rather than just complain, or worse yet, disengage from the democratic process altogether, that there are certain things that can be done, in my judgment, to raise the caliber and the tenor of our politicos. And one of the things that can be done is to invest in training and preparation for the players in this political business, which would strengthen their knowledge, their skills, their ethical foundation, and their leadership capacities. And a number of years ago, we established this Manning Center for Building Democracy, and that's what its mission is. And what I'd particularly like to talk to you about is some of the things that we're doing to try to provide more training and preparation for political staff, for potential candidates for public office, and for the all-important grassroots political volunteer. The whole object there is to strengthen the knowledge, the skill level, the ethical foundations, and the service capacities of people who advise and serve our elected officials.
Get the latest Idea City news instantly. Follow us on Twitter. Moses Znaimer's Idea City Conference. Ideas change the world.
In 2006, after the sponsorship scandal, the federal government enacted the Federal Accountability Act. It precludes political staffers and elected federal officials from working for the federal government for 5 years after they leave its employ. One of the unanticipated effects of that act is that senior people are very reluctant to take these political staff positions. So more and more of them are occupied by young people, bright young people, ambitious young people, but very little practical training in the jobs that they're in, very little experience, and very few senior people around to mentor or to guide them. So a few years ago, we established some certificate courses in Ottawa for political staff in political management, the various aspects of political management, mainly to prove that there was a market for that kind of training in Ottawa. And then we were able to put Carleton University together with Calgary oilman and philanthropist Clay Riddell. And the net result was the Riddell Graduate Program in Political Management at Carleton. It's a one-year master's program in this whole discipline of political management. This year, they'll graduate their first 25 students, and fortunately, there's been a good rush of applicants, high-quality applicants for the next year. But this kind of training, the fact that Ottawa's been sitting there for 100 years and this kind of training wasn't there astounds me. But this kind of training needs to be offered to political staffers in every provincial capital and territorial capital and municipal level as well. So we're trying to do some of that. But the whole object there is to strengthen the knowledge, the skill level, the ethical foundations, and the service capacities of people who advise and serve our elected officials. Now, then there's the candidates for public office. And many of these people they're driven by personal political ambition. You better have some ambition if you're going to get into that business. But most of them also have a genuine desire to serve their country or their legislature, their community. And they too need training and preparation. We have this proposal for create a model Parliament of Canada, an actual 60-seat replica of the House of Commons with all the accoutrements, an assembly, media chambers, caucus rooms, committee rooms, and to use it as an educational facility for these people who think they want to sit in an elected assembly, and to provide real training, not 1 or 2 or 3 days, but weeks and weeks of training in all the things that you better be up to speed on if you're going to be an elected member of the House. And again, what we're trying to do here is just strengthen the knowledge, the skills, the ethical foundations, and the leadership capacities of people who are going to sit in our elected assemblies. They raise money, they run the local campaigns, they have a lot to do with getting out the vote. But there's very little training for these people at all from their parties or from anyone else.
Great ideas are meant to be shared. Join the discussion on Facebook. Moses Znaimer's Idea City Conference. Ideas change the world.
The third category of people, political people, I'd like to talk about, and this is the group that are dearest to my heart. They're most numerous, and they're the first people that supported what we were doing, and that's your grassroots political volunteer. In this country, there's 1,100, almost 1,100 federal, provincial, and territorial ridings or electoral districts. In each of those, for each of the major parties, there's 10 to 15 people who do 80% of the work. They organize the riding. They have a lot to do in recruiting and nominating the candidate. They raise money, they run the local campaigns, they have a lot to do with getting out the vote. But there's very little training for these people at all from their parties or from anyone else. I speak to groups like that from time to time. I used to do a lot more of it, and sometimes I'd meet them in hockey rinks Saturday morning. And going into the hockey rink, I'd check the bulletin board, and quite often you'd find an advertisement for the rink manager. They're going to hire a rink manager. And I'd inquire a little bit, and sure enough, they got a rink committee. They got a job description of the rink manager. They got a profile of what qualifications you have to be a rink manager. You got to be able to drive this Zamboni. And a major effort's made to cast the net far and wide to find a rink manager. But when I ask those people, and some of these are in sophisticated ridings, these are not ridings that wouldn't know how to do this. I ask, where's your job description of your member of parliament? Where's your job description of the member of the legislature, your municipal council? Where's your profile of what kind of qualifications and qualities, character qualities, you're looking for in these people in order to represent you in the parliament? And most often, I draw a blank. And I find myself saying, you don't want to be lecturing, these are volunteers, you can't lecture volunteers, but saying, please don't tell me that you people put more effort and energy into hiring your rink manager than you do the person that's going to represent you in a parliament that's going to spend $265 billion of taxpayers' money in direct quality of life and policy that will affect yourself and your children. So another project that we've got, and it's underway now, is we're building a school of practical politics in Calgary. We got a heritage building, and the heart of it is really a lecture theater, a high-tech lecture theater where you can do the televising, the podcasting, all the things you have to do the distance learning today. And we're going to use it to try to raise that knowledge level, skill level, ethical foundation, service, and leadership capacity of these people who have a lot to do with whose names get on the ballot in the first place, and therefore have a lot to do with the composition of those who populate our democratic assembly. How much will all this cost, this building? We call it democratic political infrastructure. I was asked that question some time ago by a businessman in Vancouver. I kind of pulled a figure out of the blue. I've studied a little bit what's invested in this type of thing in other countries. And so I said, well, maybe $200 million over 10 years. And he says, well, that's a lot of money. So I said, George, what if I'd come in here and told you that my friends and I want to take over this company? This company has revenues of $265 billion. It has offices in 180 countries. It has subsidiaries in everything from atomic energy to radio and television. It has 350,000 employees. Its senior management probably doesn't agree with what we want to do with it, so it's a hostile takeover. How much money would you want us to have in our war chest before you would join us in taking a shot at an elephant like that? Well, he says, a lot more than $200 million. I said, George, I just described to you the government of Canada. I didn't add in the government of Quebec, the government of Ontario, the government of Alberta, the government of British Columbia. But when you ask your political people, no matter what their political stripe is, to take over one of these entities, not just take them over, but in some way raise their performance or change their direction, that this is the magnitude of the task of what you're asking them to do. And so I have no hesitation about going to audiences big or small and rich or poor and asking for money, because that's the magnitude of the investment that has to be made in, if we're serious about raising the knowledge level, the skill level, the ethical foundations, and the inspirational and leadership capacities of these democratic institutions. Maybe a question I should ask, because it may be on your mind. Is it an impossible dream to think that you can raise the caliber and the performance level of your political class?
Get the latest Idealist news, presenter information, and watch streaming video at ideacityonline.com. Moses Znaimer's Idea City Conference. Ideas change the world.
Now, finally, maybe a question I should ask because it may be on your mind. Is it an impossible dream to think that you can raise the caliber and the performance level of your political class? Well, I don't think it is, and here's why. 25 years ago, 5 people met in a room in Calgary who were very discontented with the state of federal politics at that time, and resolved to try to do a few things to change it. One of the things we wanted to do was to make budget balancing, fiscal responsibility a priority with every senior level of government in the country at a time when it wasn't a priority. The second thing we wanted to do was to shift the political center of gravity of the country. This is the second largest country by landmass on the face of the earth. Shift the geopolitical center of gravity of the country from the old Laurentian region, Ontario and Quebec, to a new alignment in which Western Canada would have a stronger voice and a stronger influence. And we went out and tried to accomplish that by changing the agenda and somehow changing the composition, particularly the federal parliament. Some worked with think tanks like the Fraser Institute, the C.D. Howe Institute, ones that were working on the fiscal responsibility theme. Some joined or started interest groups, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the EEE Senate Committee. There was half a dozen of them. Some worked through the media, the Alberta Report, the Western Report, eventually the National Post. And some of us started a political party. This is not foreign to the political culture of Western Canada or Quebec. It's a little bit, strikes Ontario people a little, and Atlantic people a little bit strange, but it's not strange in our part of the country. And we not only started one political party, we had to create 3, the Reform Party of Canada, and to broaden it out to create the Canadian Alliance, and then eventually the reconstituted, or I would say reformed, Conservative Party of Canada. And along the way, we made all kinds of mistakes. We have casualties. We had people that started out with us, but never got across the finish line. And of course, we never began to accomplish all the things that we thought we could accomplish. But nevertheless, notwithstanding that, 25 years later, there isn't a single senior government in this country that doesn't at least profess to be committed to budget balancing. And lo and behold, on May the 2nd, 2011, with 145 of the 166 seats won by that majority government of Stephen Harper's being west of the Ottawa River, the political center of gravity of the country shifted from the old Laurentian region to a new alignment between Ontario and a reinvigorated West. Now, that's the, whether or not you agree with my political agenda or values isn't the point. The point is that it is possible, even today, to take the tools that democracy gives to us all for freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, freedom of association, and to use those tools to reshape the composition of your elected assemblies and to, in some way, change their agenda. But for that to really happen, and for it to happen for the broad good of the country, you're going to need investments in the training and preparation of the politicos to strengthen their knowledge level, their skill level, their ethical foundations, and their leadership capacities. So that's the big idea that I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about it as a Canadian, and since it's your country and your democracy, I'm hopeful that I can persuade some of you to be passionate about it too. Thank you very much. Hold it.
Thank you. You know, politics is often described as a blood sport. The attitudes are adversarial, the elbows are sharp, right. And I think it's a damn pity that someone as decent and as sincere as Preston Manning is not in active politics with power.
Idea City is a place where ideas come face to face to inspire and give us hope. At this time, our planet needs it most. Idea City is a place. Everybody sing. Where ideas come face to face to inspire and give us hope. At this time, our planet needs it most. Idea City, gotta bring our ideas to Idea City, where ideas come face to face to inspire and give us hope. At this time, our planet needs it most. Idea City is a place where ideas come face to face to inspire and give us hope. At this time, our planet needs it most. Idea City is a place. Everybody sing. Where ideas come face to face to inspire and give us hope. At this time.